And now we'll take you around the world in the next 30 minutes. Britain Prime Minister publicly blamed Russia for a chemical weapons attack on UK soil. In a House of Commons statement, Prime Minister Theresa May said it was highly likely that Moscow was responsible for the poisoning in the England of ex-spy and his daughter. The White House condemned the poisoning in England of former Russian double agent Sergei Skripal and his daughter using a military-grade nerve agent. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said the alliance was deeply concerned about the attack on a Russian double agent in Britain and was in contact with UK authorities about the matter. President Vladimir Putin said that Britain should work out what happened to a former Russian spy struck down by nerve gas in southern England before talking to Russia. British police and forensic experts on Monday searched multiple locations in and around Salisbury in the hunt for evidence in the poisoning of former Russian double agent and his daughter. U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Nikki Haley warned that Washington remains prepared to act if the U.S. Security Council fails to act on Syria as the Syrian army's onslaught in eastern Ghouta continued unabated. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said about 511,000 people have been killed in the Syrian war since it began 7 years ago. The conflict began after mass protests in March 2011, dragging in regional and global powers and forcing millions of people to flee their homes. As the Syrian army pushes deeper into eastern Ghouta under cover of a hammering bombardment, the 400,000 civilians that the United Nations says live in the enclave have crowded into dark basements to cover from the ceaseless bombs. U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson said several steps will be necessary to agree the location and scope of talks between the United States and Northern Korea. Japan and South Korea have agreed that maximum pressure must be maintained on North Korea until it takes concrete actions towards addressing concerns about its nuclear weapon and missile programs. A UN investigation said any progress in the nuclear and security dialogue with North Korea at upcoming summits must be accompanied by discussions on human rights violations, including political prison camps. House Intelligence Committee Republicans said on Monday the panel had finished conducting interviews in its investigation of Russia and the 2016 U.S. election and found no collusion between President Donald Trump's associates and Moscow's efforts to influence the campaign. Under pressure from gun rights group, President Donald Trump backed away from raising the minimum age for gun purchases from 18 to 21, one of several measures he had supported after the latest U.S. school shooting. The White House spokeswoman said Trump still backs some of those changes, including new age limits, but is focusing on measures that can get through the U.S. Congress. U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson said Washington was considering lifting a travel ban on Chad, offering an olive branch to a key ally in the fight against Islamist militant groups in West Africa. Eurozone finance minister said the European Union will work to avoid a trade war with the US, but stands ready to deploy countermeasures if Washington does not exempt the EU from its proposed tariffs on aluminium and steel. US President Donald Trump will visit California today to inspect prototypes for his controversial wall along the border with Mexico. Trump's visit will be his first trip to the Golden State since taking office in January 2017. Both pro and anti-Trump protests are expected. US President Donald Trump will host Saudi Arabia's powerful Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman on March 20th. Trump looks forward to discussing ways to strengthen ties between the United States and Saudi Arabia. A package bomb that killed a Texas teenager and injured a woman on Monday is believed to be linked to a deadly blast in the state's capital city earlier this month. Moments before a helicopter crashed into the frigid waters of the East River, killing all 5 passengers aboard, with only the pilot surviving. On Sunday night, the pilot sent a distress call over his radio saying the engine had failed. A crane pulled a submerged helicopter from New York's East River a day after a crash that killed 5 people. A firefighter and a videographer from Texas and an Argentine tourist were among the 5 passengers killed, with only the pilot surviving. Nepali Prime Minister Khadga Prasad Oli visited the plane crash site hours after a Bangladesh airliner crashed while landing at the airport in the Nepal's capital, Kathmandu, killing at least 50 people. President Vladimir Putin is preparing to run for re-election this week, a contest he seems sure to win comfortably and extend his grip on power into a 3rd decade. If he wins what will be a 4th presidential term, he will be eligible to serve another 6 years until 2024. President Xi Jinping stressed practical efforts to further deepen military-civilian integration to provide impetus and support for realizing the Chinese dream and the goal to build a strong military. Bangladesh Nationalist Party chairperson Khaleda Zia, convicted in a corruption case, was granted bail on Monday. BNP leader Zia secured a 4-month bail in the Zia Orphanage Trust corruption case, in which she was handed 5 years of imprisonment by a Bangladesh court. Amnesty International condemned Myanmar authorities' treatment of Rohingya Muslims after the campaign group released a report claiming that military bases are being built where Rohingya used to live and where mosques once stood. United Nations Special Rapporteur Yanghee Lee said Facebook was being used to incite hatred of the country's Rohingya population. Lee said the government and hardline nationalist monks use Facebook as a means of communication and to spread anti-Muslim rhetoric. An Indonesian university has revoked ban on face wheels after criticism that it trampled on personal choice. The university had issued the edict last week to more than 3 dozen wheel-wearing students and warned they could be expelled for non-compliance. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe apologized for the finance ministry, acknowledged it had altered documents related to a suspected cronyism scandal, adding that he felt responsible for the current situation. Japanese Finance Minister Taro Aso said he had no intention to resign over revelations that documents related to a state land sale were altered. He apologized for the regrettable situation, followed by an explanation that alterations were conducted by bureaucrats at the Finance Ministry's division in charge of state and sales. Palestinians clashed with Israeli forces against Israeli measures towards university students. Students from Birzeit University protested against Israeli forces' raid into the university last week. During the protest, they blocked a street that leads to an Israeli checkpoint in Al-Birai, near the West Bank city of Ramallah. Dozens of ultra-Orthodox Jews blocked a main artery near Tel Aviv in the latest protest against compulsory military service. A police statement said that around 50 protesters cut off the north-south Highway 4 in the predominant ultra-Orthodox city of Newark. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas met with Jordan's King Abdullah in Amman to discuss latest updates on the status of Jerusalem and US President Donald Trump's Middle East peace plan. Slovak Interior Minister Robert Kalinak resigned, bowing to the demands of a junior coalition partner as Prime Minister Robert Fico fights to save his government amid mass protests following a journalist murder. The European Union's foreign policy chief, Federica Mogherini, said there was no fatigue on the part of the EU towards Ukraine as demonstrated by its extension of sanctions on Russia and financial aid for Kiev. The head of Eurogroup of Eurozone finance ministers said Eurozone creditors will disburse new loans to Greece this month and are working on debt relief measures, moves that should help strengthen the Greek recovery. Before signing an agreement on her new coalition government, German Chancellor Angela Merkel said Germany and its European Union partners must act quickly to find common ground on a European investment budget. German Chancellor Angela Merkel said she would visit French President Emmanuel Macron to discuss EU reform proposals without naming a date. Merkel said she would visit Paris ahead of an EU summit next week. Croatia's President Kolinda Grabar-Kitarovic took part in a wreath-laying ceremony in Buenos Aires in honor of the Argentine national hero Jose de San Martin during a diplomatic visit to Argentina. Colombians gave left-wing candidate Gustavo Petro about 40% fewer votes than right-wing coalition candidate Ivan Duque in the presidential primary, a result that should ease market concerns. President Juan Manuel Santos said Colombia and the Marxist guerrilla group will restart peace talks in Ecuador. Santos suspended talks in late January after the National Liberation Army launched a series of bomb attacks immediately following the end of the two sides' first ever ceasefire. Exiled Democratic Republic of Congo opposition leader Moise Katumbi said that he would return home by June to lodge his candidacy for a presidential election in December to succeed Joseph Kabila. Venezuela's political opposition asked the United Nations to not send observers to the presidential vote scheduled for May 20th, while also calling for demonstrations against the elections that they consider to be a fraud. Statistics show the Venezuelan refugee crisis in Brazil worsening, with hundreds pouring into the country on a daily basis. In Boa Vista alone, about 40,000 Venezuelans, more than 10% of the city's population, have reportedly arrived, with the influx accelerating over the year. Bolivian President Evo Morales called on Chile to open up dialogue on Bolivia's quest to regain sovereign access to the sea just days before the issue arrives at the International Criminal Court of Justice. Elderly and disabled Chileans took to the streets of Santiago to demand lower transit fares and increased pensions at an event dubbed the March of the Canes. Marching through downtown streets, the protesters held signs, chanted slogans, and waved flags while calling on the government of newly inaugurated President Sebastián Piñera to do more for senior citizens and the disabled. After 2 Air France managers were left with their shirts ripped off due to a protest over job cuts in 2015, 12 people involved in the incident have begun an appeal trial in Paris. New York's Metropolitan Opera said that it had fired its longtime conductor and musical director James Levine after an inquiry found credible evidence to support accusations against him of sexual misconduct. Prince Harry's American fiancée Meghan Markle took part in a first official royal engagement with Britain's Queen Elizabeth since the couple announced their engagement last year. Markle joined Prince Harry and the entire royal family at London's Westminster Abbey for the Commonwealth service. Members of Britain's royal family greeted school children in London after the annual Commonwealth service at Westminster Abbey. Prince William and his wife Kate, along with Prince Harry and his fiancée Meghan Markle, greeted the children in Dean's Yard in Westminster. President Donald Trump honored the Houston Astros for their first World Series win that Trump said was even more meaningful following the devastation Hurricane Harvey brought on the Texas city. Houston defeated the Los Angeles Dodgers in the Game 7 last year to clinch the title. The man known as Bookkeeper Auschwitz, who in 2015 became one of the last people to be convicted for crimes in the Nazi genocide of Europe's Jews during World War II, has died at the age of 96. French fashion designer Hubert de Givenchy, an aristocrat who founded the House of Givenchy in the 1950s, becoming famous for dressing the likes of Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis and Grace Kelly, has died at the age of 91. An ice bridge broke off from the Perito Moreno Glacier in Argentina's Patagonia region in a cyclic phenomenon that attracts thousands of tourists. The glacier, a massive tongue of ice in the Santa Cruz province that covers 250 square kilometers, advances yearly into a lake known as Lago Argentino. Jahaz Mahal, an ancient fort in India's central Mandu city, on Monday. A popular tourist destination, the ancient fort city of Mandu is home to historical monuments including the 14th century mosques and Jain temples. Karti Chidambaram has been sent to judicial custody till March 24th in the INX media corruption case. He has moved Delhi court seeking bail. The matter will be heard today by an appropriate bench. Sonia Gandhi will today host a dinner which is likely to be attended by leaders of 17 opposition parties amid talks of forging a broader front against the BJP-led NDA ahead of the 2019 general elections. Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal has called for an all-party meeting at his residence to find solutions to the problems being faced by traders due to the sealing drive in the national capital.